Hello and welcome to this segment of Take 5 with Tony. This is the fifth and last in our series on economic growth. We'll be talking more about economic growth, especially alternatives to economic growth in the future, but we're wrapping up today's series focusing on something called the steady state economy, an idea coined by Herman, Daly, and others. But first, let's recall a little bit about economic growth. If you've watched any of the other segments in the series, you'll remember that economic growth has been the absolute foundation, the centerpiece of our economic writing, thinking, policy, and practices for more than 200 years. And that, in fact, it's been so dominant in our thinking that we haven't really worked on an alternative, so that when we stop growing or slow down our economic growth, we get recession and depression, confirming the idea in most people's minds that there is no alternative to economic growth. But you might recall that economic growth has not worked that well, especially in advanced economies like the US over the last 40 or 50 years. We saw how the economy grew dramatically from the time of Ronald Reagan's inauguration, and yet people, ordinary working people and middle class, didn't see their wealth and income grow. They saw them stagnate or decline. We saw the host of ecological problems, from the acidification of the oceans, the depletion of groundwater, to too much carbon and climate change in the atmosphere. And we saw also that although technology, especially technologies that improve our efficiency, have helped to make industries, energy, and our lives more efficient, that efficiency has been overwhelmed by the sheer scale of constant economic growth. So the question is, if not economic growth, what's the alternative? Well, let's go right down on the ground to talk about that. Now, Herman, Daly, Gus Speth, and others have been talking for quite some time about this idea of a steady state economy as an alternative to constant economic growth. And a steady state economy has three basic principles and goals. The first, the most fundamental, is that our economy, our human lives, must fit within the ecosystem. That we cannot take out more materials and energy than the ecosystem can provide and regenerate. And neither can we put in more waste from our cars, our industry, or ourselves than the ecosystem can absorb and assimilate. The second principle is the idea of creating a good life for the many rather than extravagant lives for a few. Right now, 80 people own the same wealth as 3.5 billion, half of humanity. That's what economic growth has gotten us. And the third principle is the idea of the right scale for the economy. Not always the biggest, the maximum scale, but the optimum scale. Rob Dietz and Dan O'Neill put it best when they said, instead of focusing on more, focus on enough. Now, I'm in this plank position, and you can probably hear me panting a bit, to illustrate that although when you think of a steady state economy, you might think that it's just standing still, that it's stuck in a rut, that it's not progressing. But actually, a steady state economy is probably a lot more like a plank. It's going to require, first of all, that every muscle in the body, large and small, does work. That working together, all of those muscles from top to bottom have to be stronger, more flexible, and more resilient. And that only when all of the muscles, large and small, top to bottom, work together in sort of a dynamic tension, is it possible that we can achieve the balance and harmony that we want in a plank and we sure want in an economy and society. Those are the fundamental ideas behind a steady state economy, which we'll explore more in the future. But for now, I've got to get out of this plank, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks.